All right, let's go back to our discussion, shall we? So now what we want to do, we've talked about arrogance as an emotional sin, haven't we? But we haven't really identified the spiritual aspects to the sin, have we? So what are they? That's the question. So what are the spiritual beliefs that would drive arrogance?
I'm better than everyone else.
Sorry?
I'm better than whoever.
All right, so
I'm better.
So one of them is you could say a view. You could say a view of superiority, and that's not. So in other words, I'll say I am not equal to others. Right? So I don't feel equal to others, I want to feel superior to them. Yep. Anything else?
I don't need to apologize.
I don't need to apologise. Yes. So what's that? I don't need to be repentant.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, you could almost say it's a fear of repentance, isn't it? In a way. Yeah. So I don't need to repent. Yep.
I'm not humble.
I'm not humble. Well, let's put it in a way that, obviously if we're arrogant, we're not humble, but let's put it in a way in terms of what is a spiritual belief? Humility is worthless or weak, isn't it? Humility is weak. Yeah. A lot of people feel humility is weakness. Yeah. It's sort of like, now I've got to be humble, so now, I've got to... And in fact, in some languages we found out that their translation of the word humility is actually prone towards weakness. Yeah. Which is sad, really, because it's basically saying, if you're humble, you're weak. Not very good.
Isn't that like the word meek in English?
Yeah.
Where it has that same connotation?
Yeah, meek meaning without any real conviction and, all this kind of stuff, rather than being, in the first century I said the meek will inherit the earth, but I didn't mean that the easily led would inherit the earth. Yeah, so, yeah. Any others?
I am perfect.
I'm already perfect, or I'm already good enough. I'm perfect. Obviously, probably the real one we feel is I am better than others. Not necessarily perfect, but I'm pretty damn good. Yeah. So, so these are spiritual beliefs. And that these spiritual beliefs drive the tendency towards arrogance, don't they, really? So arrogance is an emotion, and it's an emotion you feel towards others. So if you're sensitive to it, you can feel it. Hey, it's like pretty full on. And Mary and I were just having a joke about it when we just went home to get some water and stuff. And there's Mickey Mouse arrogance, and there's sort of like, man arrogance, and then there's the Hulk arrogance. Many of you are in the Hulk arrogance. So it's just
Can it be I don't need God?
I don't need God. It's fundamentally, it's a view actually that I am God. I have the right to determine what I think is right and live how I think is right and do what I think is right, feel what I think is right. And so it's really fundamentally the feeling, and I know many of you don't feel it like I am God, but there is this fundamental feeling, isn't there, that I have the right to determine everything about my life independent of God.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is this, sorry.
So I'm just going to write I am God with that extra bit that I said, right? Yeah. So if you think about the very first human couple, this is exactly, they decided, what they said to themselves was, like, God created us, they recognized God created them really, really good, right? So perfect. And by the way, they were more perfect than any of us have ever lived on earth since. They had a more perfect body than I had in the first century. My body got knocked around a lot in the first century, so it wasn't that perfect. And they had a perfect body, perfect appearance, beautiful in appearance. In fact, I think in the Paget messages it actually says, I think a man or a mon said, there's been nobody since us who's looked as good as we did. And something like that, she said. And that's true. And they were created absolutely perfect. And so they came to the opinion eventually that they felt that they could live independently of God's laws and make their own. So fundamentally, arrogance is, I'm my own lawmaker. Right? So.
And can we also say, Jay, like I define reality? It's sort of related, but
Yeah.
it's saying I know what the situation is here.
I define truth.
Yeah.
Or you could say what is truth is what is real. Can you? So I define what is real.
Well, I wasn't a very good Christian. I didn't go to church all that much.
Yeah.
But I do remember a lot of this talk about the superiority of the humans.
Yeah.
And the dominion over everything and
Yeah.
the control of the animals and the plants.
Well, see, it's interesting, isn't it, that God creates the pinnacle of his creation, which are humans, and then we sort of take on the view we are superior to the rest of his creation, which is actually true. Humans are the pinnacle of God's creation. We are superior to all other creations. But then we take it one step further and says, that means that I can destroy all other creation for my own sake, or have dominion over creation, as they call it. Now, God intended that we live in harmony with creation, rather than have dominion or control over creation. Of course, our soul does control creation.
No, you're right. I was just going to say, that God created us as the highest creation and felt like, if these creatures love, they will care for
everything.
Yeah, they're the best equipped to care for all of the rest of creation.
As our self-actualized, self-realizing beings.
Yes, they have this will that they can employ, not just instinctual. So they're going to care for it really well.
Yeah.
But obviously when we sin, we do the opposite.
And we have the view that we have dominion or power over. A lot of us use that power very poorly. Right? So when we define, I'm saying I am the lawmaker, I'm saying I'm allowed to decide how I'm going to use my power, how I'm going to use my energy, how I'm going to use the resource of me. And we're basically fundamentally saying without any restriction. So we're not honouring that there is a restriction. See, if we truly understood our own position with God, we would honour that God has the right to create laws, and those laws would create a restriction upon our behaviour if we choose to do things out of harmony with the love structure, you could say. So you can see, with arrogance, it might appear to be such a small thing, but actually when you start listing the problems, the spiritual problems associated, can you see how big they are?
Yeah, I'll start with I.
Right? So they're pretty intense, big issues that we develop inside of ourselves when it comes to our beliefs, when we have the emotion of arrogance. This is why usually every person who's arrogant ends up in the hells when they arrive in the spirit world, right? So and by the way, even if they think they did nothing wrong, so there's a lot of people who pass who have been, let's say, a part of a religious faith, and they've been very moral all of their life. So they've been sexually moral in the sense that they haven't, in their definition, which is, I was married to my wife and that's who I had sex with and no one else. And, they're very moral in the sense that they believe themselves to be moral. I never stole from anybody. I never killed anybody. I never tried to personally harm anybody, but they carried this arrogance, right? Many religious leaders are in this place, many Christian and Muslim religious leaders in particular, but also Hindu and Buddhist religious leaders are in this place of arrogance as well. And when they pass, they're absolutely shocked about where they arrive. And in fact, there's a record in the Robert James Lee's books, isn't there? One of them who wrote. Those of you remember?
Who's in charge here?
Yeah, he said, who's in charge here? He's in rags. He's dressed in rags, which is an indication of his condition. He says, who's in charge here? They've given me the wrong garb. According to the Bible, I should be dressed in my fancy robe with Jesus, you know, like, and this is what you've given me instead. You've made a mistake. Right? And this is what an arrogant person generally feels when they pass. There's big mistakes being made here. What's wrong? You know, and the person who is often religious have had a view of what should happen, and then when their view of what should happen doesn't match their experience, they're going, well, somebody's, you know, there's been a bit of red tape go wrong here, type of thing. You know, and I've got
I need to put in a customs form.
I need to you know, present my credentials again. Not understanding that the credentials were all ripped out of you as you passed, right? In the sense of, you know, that's what presented your credentials. The condition of the soul is exposed as you pass. And you can see that with these particular ideas, often those people will remain in that place for the longest of times. Right? And the reason why they do is because their own arrogance prevents self-analysis. So the trouble with arrogance is that it gets really complicated in terms of how to deal with it. And we have all of these internal spiritual beliefs and then no motivation to see them or address them at the same time. And this is why it's a very difficult injury to address. Now, as I said, your society, as is most Western societies, very prone to it. Yeah? And the more religious and the society generally, the more prone they are to it as well. Right? You see this acting out in your country with other countries. You see it acting out with the other countries that are also prone to it. So you look at the two primary faiths that believe in God, even though the Christian faith is generally a triune God. You look at those primary countries that believe in God one way or the other, the Muslim faith and the Christian faith, there is a lot of animosity, and historically has been a lot of animosity based on this arrogance, actually. The arrogance that our faith is better than your faith, when both faiths don't have this problem, right? And so these kind of things, when you've grown up in a country that's had a predisposition towards that, whether you're religious or not, there's a predisposition towards the attitude, right? And so that's what makes it quite difficult to address. And it's going to be quite a difficult thing for people in America and in Europe and in places like the Arab nations and so forth to address, because there's such an extreme level of conviction that their beliefs are correct, they're righteous, they're good. And when you attach your righteousness of your beliefs to a belief in God, they often become so extreme that you're willing to kill for such beliefs. And so historically, you can see many of the wars that we've had on earth have been primarily between a couple or 3 or 4 different types of religious faiths, because of that extreme arrogance that develops over time in societies that believe these things. So yeah, very, very difficult thing to address.
I have a question. So there's like a few of them are when we think about our superiority towards another person,
Yep.
and then the others is like when we are not humble towards God, and then all of those fall under the category of the self-reliance.
Yes, they
and
do.
then the self-reliance falls under the category of arrogance.
Yes.
But the question is like, if I say I address one of those emotions, like for example, I'm perfect, and then I work through it, and I say, oh, actually, I'm not perfect.
No. Yeah.
Does that mean that I also address the bigger emotion that it's like self-reliance?
Well, when you say the bigger emotion, All the emotions you mentioned are smaller problems, are not bigger problems. So these are the biggest problems because they are the biggest sins. Remember I said the spiritual sins are the worst ones you can get. So these are the biggest problems, and the emotions they cause, like self-reliance, the attitude of selfishness, and all these other attitudes, they are emotions which are the result of these beliefs.
Oh, so it's the other way around.
It's the other way around.
Oh,
So if I get rid of that belief, the I am perfect or I am better than others belief, for example, let's say I get that, work through that, then of course that's going to change the way I treat people. It's going to change my attitude towards sin. I'm going to recognise that I am a sinner rather than thinking that I'm not. And it's going to also change my attitude to God, that maybe I should ask God what my sins are rather than just ignoring God. Right? So these spiritual beliefs are higher, not lower, than the emotions you're experiencing. The emotions, you could say, are the subsequent result of the spiritual sin being embedded in my soul. And the emotions I have then are the result of the beliefs being acted upon. Yeah? Make sense?
I'm struggling a little bit.
Struggling?
Like I'm struggling just because I feel like when you say the emotion isn't like these ones that we're writing out are the beliefs, and then the emotion is going to be self-reliance. So the self-belief manifests into the emotion of self-reliance.
No, the emotion that causes your belief drives a whole heap of other emotions that are out of harmony with love.
Okay.
That you wouldn't have unless you had the belief. So for example, if I go back here, if I have the belief that I'm better than others, just that one belief, then when I'm interacting with you, I'm going to have certain emotions towards you. Some of those emotions are, I'll be condescending with you. I'll go, oh, Danny, you really don't know what you're talking about, do you? You've really got no idea about life, have you? That'd sort of be one of the attitudes I might have if I have the feeling I'm better than you, right? And then another attitude might be, my life's more important than yours. You know, you're one of these people in Africa who haven't really got things together. I live in America, we've got things together in America, right? So you might even have that feeling, right, towards another. Now, there are feelings, emotions, that are sins, that are coming from this underlying belief you have, which is also emotional, which is, I am better than these people. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if I get rid of the I am better, so I cross that off my list of sins by going through the process of repentance. Right, obviously this one's going to have to go as well at the same time, isn't it? And probably quite a number of these. But once I cross those off my list, now when I come to you and you have a different opinion than me, instead of being condescending with you, I'll go, well, I disagree with that. Do you want to know why I disagree?
So there's the cause and then everything else.
That's right. So everything, all the emotions you could say that you're experiencing towards others that are sins are really the effects of the spiritual sin, which is the cause, which is really, if you trace it right back, it's a faith that I have here. This is actually, the spiritual sins are all faiths. They're all things I believe for my future. So I am better means I've got a faith that I am better, so that means I'm going to act like I'm better. Until I get rid of that feeling, until I can feel that I'm equal, I will continue to act like I'm better. And whatever situation comes along, I'll act like I'm better. So let's say there's a shortage of food in the supermarket. I'll act like I deserve the food first, right? And if there's a feeling that if you have more money you're better, then I'll go for more money because that will make me better. If there's a feeling that I come from a certain family or certain race of people and that makes me better, then I'll look at every other race and go, yeah, see, you're not as good as us, see? You know? And when I see the Olympics, I'll be barracking for whatever I think is better. America. Right? So, can you see it'll play out in a lot of areas of my life, just seemingly innocently, but not really innocently, because these are big sins that pervade large areas of our life. When we look about correction of children, for example, we go, well, in America we have better children, because we're better. I'm better and my children are better. So if you think you're better, you obviously think your children are better. So now when there's a problem at school and there's a problem between two children and one of them's yours, you go, my child's not at fault, it's the other kid. Right? We're better than that, right? So it pervades everywhere, how you act, what you do, and how you think, and everything. It's like it infects everything. And a lot of times we are so unconscious that it's affecting everything as well. In this state, we don't realise, wow, it's there, everywhere in my life. All the things that I thought that I understood, I am actually understanding through my arrogance. So therefore, all flawed. And so all the things I think I get, when I read a medical journal and I get that and I go, my arrogance is going to change how I perceive it. You won't be assessing everything from God's perspective. You'll be assessing it from the point of view of what's a better arrogant condition to look at it. Right? It'll pervade every area of your life. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think too, I misunderstood, and I'm only starting to understand that a belief or faith, as you call it, isn't something that's in your head.
No.
And that's what's
It's
so
a
confusing, because it comes at a time when you're really young and you form these.
Not always. Not always when you're really young. Most people, in fact, develop them during their teenage years. They have an experience in their childhood which does sort of formulate some of their belief systems, but many of their belief systems come from the teenage years where you're sorting out your life and making decisions and choices, and you're rejecting certain things from your childhood but accepting other things from your childhood and making decisions about them. And so yes, a lot of times your sins, your beliefs are going to be different to your mum and dad's, but they're still flawed. Right, so your mum and dad might be Christians, and you might decide, I'm not into that. That's also wrong, and it's got all this problem with superiority of men over women and all these other things. So you decide, no, New Age is better, so I'm going to go for that. Not understanding that you also, the arrogant feeling is now New Age is better. We've got better belief system. We're better than you are. Look, I've become a vegan. I'm better than all the meat eaters. That kind of thing. These are attitudes that develop, and you often develop them not just in your childhood, but throughout your life. Yeah, you might have an experience with a partner where you had a fairly good relationship at the beginning, but then it decayed, and he became more and more like passive. Like he became one of these guys who basically expected you to go to work and come home and clean up after him. And he became like video game player or whatever over the course of his life because of whatever injuries he had. And you started developing arrogance towards him and saying, he's weak man, stupid, like this video game crap, what's going on there? And you develop this sort of attitude of because you're the one who gets everything done in the family, that makes you better. And so the arrogance develops there, I'm better than these guys that are like that.
So it can strengthen over time, or
yeah, and frequently does.
Yeah, and also you see people throughout their life, if they don't feel things, they develop faiths or beliefs in
support of like not feeling.
Many women in their 50s who are just like, romance is a sham, men are horrible. They didn't have that belief when they were 15, but they had some life experiences that they didn't grieve. And now
and also some experiences with their father they didn't grieve.
Coming from there, but it's become their own belief now. It's become something strengthened inside of them. It's something that, whereas when they were 15 or 25, they might have taken some chances, and risked their heart, if you like, in a relationship.
Now when they're 15, they're never going to do it again.
So they've got a faith for the future that any relationship with a man is going to end in heartache
Disaster.
or harm or what have you, and it becomes their faith then.
So don't think that all of your corrupt faith begins when you're just little, because that's not how it works. And in fact, if it was how it worked, God wouldn't attribute any of the sin to you. because it wouldn't be right, would it, to attribute sin to a child who's barely functioning in terms of understanding anything. So the problem is most of our sin, most of our false beliefs which create sin are developed during our adult life.
Yeah. No, that makes sense, because listening to you guys, I had to address my complete, like, inability to see God as a being.
Yeah. And that gets developed over life too.
Right, that didn't start when I
Yeah.
was young.
That's right. A lot of people have a belief in God when they're little,
Mhm.
and sometimes it gets squashed by a family, but oftentimes in a religious society it doesn't. And it's only when you go through experiences in your teenage years and your adult life where you feel disappointed and God's not giving you what you thought God would give you, and God's not helping you out the way you thought God should help you out, and God's not doing these things for you that you should feel, He should meet your addictions and He's not doing it. And so after a while you can even give up believing God completely.
Mhm.
So a person can start out having a sort of, in their childhood, having quite a strong feeling that God exists, and end up in their 30 having a feeling that, no, they're an atheist.
Yeah.
And so these beliefs change over time because of how we handle our emotions, and then how we join new beliefs to handle the emotion rather than feel the emotion. So most people on earth are used to managing their emotions. So they manage or control them one way or the other. Make sense?
Yes, thank you.
I know in other videos you said that a majority of like causal emotions get formed when we're really little. Is that maybe I'm misunderstanding that, but is it are majority still coming kind of below the age of 7, or is it like kind of equal weighting from God's perspective?
A lot of our emotions that drive our actions get formulated between 0 and 7. And we are not allowed, generally by our society, to feel them, or we've come to learn that we shouldn't feel them, right? But then after 7, we start developing belief systems to support that emotional state rather than clearing away the emotion. So these beliefs then start driving. So if you think about that emotion as a child, you could say they're the sins of others in the child. So the problem isn't the sins of others. The problem is I refuse to let go of the sins of others emotionally, right? So you can say all these sort of causal emotions, which we referred to in the past, that they are sins that we've imbibed from others. But God doesn't blame you for them. God doesn't attribute blame to you for them. But what we do with that is we start developing beliefs as we start formulating, our brain starts developing and our teenage life starts developing. We start forming belief systems to prevent ourselves from feeling those emotions. You follow me? Now we are purposely choosing to sin in lots of different ways in order to prevent feeling about the sins of others. What we're really saying to ourselves is, other people did these things to me, I shouldn't have to deal with them. Is really what we're saying.
Then we start our career of sin, our own career.
And we end up doing a lot of things to other people in that career, right? Because one of the beliefs that develops right very soon after we realise that we have this harm is that and a lot of us are not even aware of what kind of harm, because sometimes it can be superiority harm and other kinds of harm, and we're not aware of it and we like it, so we continue in it. And so we're not focused on dealing with that harm and releasing it. What we're focused on is developing beliefs that help support it, the system. Developing beliefs that help me suppress it, to help me control it, to help me get away from it without feeling it, is the goal.
Follow-up question on that. So when you feel the belief, is the belief itself, like in an isolated way, going to be an emotion, or is it just like...
Well, it's going to lead you to many emotions, isn't it? Because there might be many reasons. So, for example, if you have a feeling that you're better, there might be many reasons why in your childhood you have imbibed that belief. So that, Dad might have said, you're a great son and you're better than the other guys, and then when there's been a little barney between you and someone else, Dad supported you, to say, no, you're right, he's wrong, and then Mum says, oh, you're better than your dad, and when there's an argument between you and your dad, mum sides with you, and you know, there's a whole heap of events going on in childhood, which then establish within you the feeling like, I am better than my dad, and I'm better than my mum too, because she serves me. You know, she does all my cooking for me, my cleaning for me. Many women believe this is loving their child, but it's not. And so I grow up now. Now I'm in my teenage years, so I'm starting to experiment with this now, with this concept of how good I am. Yeah? And in the process of experimenting with it, I'm now joining all of these emotions with belief systems that I carry on through the rest of my life. And so once I start addressing the sin of the belief, and remember, here we're talking about the priority of sin, the spiritual sins being the biggest. One spiritual sin helps cover over so many emotional sins. One spiritual sin. So the spiritual sin of arrogance covers over many, many emotions that I've got going on. Some of them which I feel are painful, but other ones which I feel are pleasurable.
That I'll have to give up.
That I would have to give up if I wasn't arrogant. So an example of that is I like feeling superior. I think it's pleasurable, let's say. So that's an example of an emotion that I think is pleasurable, but I don't have to give it up, right? And so in that process, you've got the belief now is supporting all of your future decisions. I am better than you means that I can now start to do more things, sinning against the concept of equality. Sinning here, sinning there, sinning here, because I think I'm better and I deserve it. Right? Now, I might not have felt that when I was 7. When I was 7, I might have just had a number of emotions that I would have had to deal with. But I didn't want to deal with them for whatever reason, or I liked them, and so therefore I want to keep them. And as a result of that, I'm now developing beliefs which support me keeping all of that, as well as support me sinning in further ways. Right? So all of that childhood emotion, what you call the causal emotion, that's not the actual sin of mine. Often it was other people who trained me in those things before I was developed enough to even understand, right? But what is the sin of mine is me avoiding it, and then using unloving techniques to avoid it in the future, and also using unloving techniques to develop an attitude towards others that causes damage to them. That's my sin. Right? In the 2019 assistance groups, not up. But the outlines are up.
They are.
Yeah. And there's some outlines about, you know, what's my sin and what's other people's sin. If you have a look at those lists, you will see that, you know, some of the things we said, this is my sin and this is other people's sin. And it was funny with the group, because when we did the group, we said, how much of your sin is other people's sin that you've imbibed and how much is yours? And the average person said, well, pretty much all of it's what other people did. Right? And then this is a little bit of what I did in response to what other people did. Right? And actually, when you start looking at the list that we wrote on this, on one of the outlines, you'll see that there's 1 or 2 things that are listed at the beginning with what other people did, and then the rest you did. Right? And much of what you did was conscious. And when I say conscious, during your teenage years, for example, much of what you did, you felt and even had some inklings that were wrong, but you still went ahead and did them anyway. You even had a partially working conscience still back then sometimes, and you still went ahead and did them anyway. Like, you ignored the conscience and everything in order to do them. So you even felt they were wrong while you were doing them sometimes, right? And this is what we need to come to terms with, that this is what we've done.
Something we talked about in that group was the pain and suffering in our life right now. Where is that coming from? And a lot of us think, oh, that's coming from what happened when I was a child. But actually, the majority of the pain and suffering in your life right now has come from what you've done to avoid just a tiny little bit of pain in your childhood.
Yeah.
You've created this big mountain of pain because you taking actions, making decisions in the way that you treat yourself and others and in the environment every day to avoid that, and that's creating a lot of pain, suffering, and compensation.
Yeah.
in your life, which is the pain and suffering is the compensation
That's
in your
right.
life. Yeah.
So a lot of the pain and suffering of a child is not as a result of their own choices and decisions. It's often the result, although that being said, nowadays the way children are being brought up, oftentimes by the time they're 3, they're starting to engage these things that a normal person at 7 or 8 would have engaged in the past. But so unfortunately, there is a lot of tendency in the latest generation of children to be almost without law in their household, without law in society, without feedback, without loving feedback, in society, because most of the parents of today's generation feel, I had terrible feedback, it was terrible for me, so I'm not going to give my children any feedback or any rules or any laws or any guidance or any direction. And this creates children who are not only quite unruly and therefore lawless, who believe they're the gods. And in fact, nowadays you often see a 3-year-old in the family bossing the entire family, which means the 3-year-old already believes he's God in the family.
So they're going to have to deal
which
with
is
these
disturbing,
beliefs.
right?
Yeah.
But then on top of that, this 3-year-old is acting in a manner that is without law, without principle, and therefore now that child is going to grow into an adult. So instead of being a teenager who flirts with all of these concepts, they're going to be a 7 or 8-year-old flirting with all of these concepts of how I can use my power and how I can use my arrogance and how superior I am over everybody and so forth. So you can see, I don't really have a lot of confidence that in the current generation of children solving mankind's problems, because the prior generation of parents who brought up this generation of children have done such a bad job with the parenting and the education process that this generation of children has turned out to be even more in addiction than the last generation of children were. And the more addiction, the more sin. So it's unlikely that anything is going to be fixed from that outcome. Yeah? So this is something we need to change, and a lot of it starts with the parents, of course, changing this, the next generation of parents changing this. Of course, the very interesting thing is when these children grow up to become a parent, and many of them won't because it will be too challenging, but the ones who do will realise how much of a nightmare they are in the sense of how much they expect their children to do everything they want, right? And then that may cause them to realise, oh, wow, I've got more problems than I realise. So that would be helpful if that occurs. But unfortunately, people who are quite self-involved and selfish generally don't want to have children. So that's also a problem, because it means that there's no corrective agency for the parent who is in this state of selfishness to see how selfish they're being. Yeah. So it's very interesting to see the dynamic of what's occurring, and of course it's going to require some sincere people at some point recognising their spiritual sins and starting to address them for these things to change.
I'm just wondering, what you said where if only we dealt with that small thing, and because it has morphed into this ginormous thing and all these problems.
When you say morphed, you know,
whereas evolved or
well,
devolved.
no, it hasn't evolved or morphed.
This hasn't evolved or changed at all. We
That's
haven't
right.
touched it.
The original problems in your childhood have not evolved and changed into this big thing. What's happened is you've avoided the original problems and created, not morphed or...
It's not these things.
You've created on purpose a whole set of avoidances of those things.
Right.
So don't think that it's some process that had to happen or some process that was out of your control.
Oh, that's not what I meant. I just meant to say, you know what you said there before?
Yeah.
So my question is, can you give an example of something that we've been avoiding, and then here are examples of like what a person did to avoid that little bit of emotion, and now this is what their life looks like because of that one little one.
There's so many.
You want to
Which
choose
one are you going to choose? I was made fun of when I cried,
Okay.
when I was a kid.
So here we go. So parents made fun of me. When I cried.
What about if siblings make fun of you?
Could be that, yeah. Someone made fun of me when I cried. That hurt.
So Mary can lead that discussion.
This is the problem when I. So, if we take this example, my parents made fun of me when I cried. How did I feel about that? What does that feel like? Sad. I might have felt ashamed. I might have felt rejected. You know, so there's pain. And then because I was made fun of, I did want to cry more about that, and I stored it. So there's my little Easter egg of pain from my childhood, and it's stored. It's locked up at the age. I might have been 3. I might have been 4 when that happened. I might have been younger or older, but you know, it's locked up. Now, as I'm growing up, I start to make decisions to never cry again because I believe I'm going to be made fun of. So what kinds of things do I do? You guys do it all the time. What do you do?
Stay busy.
I get busy.
Okay,
Yes.
so yeah.
So distracting myself through activity. Yep. Oh, yeah. Distraction.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else?
Shut down.
Yeah. What's that?
Let's be more specific.
Yeah. Let's talk about what that looks like. What I do when I shut down.
Watch TV.
Yeah. So more distraction.
So distraction.
Yep. And you could say passivity. I don't do much in my life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Passive. I have to do capitals.
You try to avoid experiences, don't you?
Avoid experience. Yeah.
Would you also become passive aggressive?
Yeah. So
Look
now
for comfort all the time.
eat. Yeah.
Oh,
Comfort.
So what do you do when you're looking for comfort? Yeah. So you eat.
Eat. And I don't want to eat like broccoli and brown rice. I want chocolate. I want coffee. I want chicken. I want chips. I want all these kind of like things that are highly processed and taxing on the earth to
Because
eat.
they shut me down.
Yes. So I want comfort food. What else do I do?
Alcohol.
Alcohol.
Okay, so drugs, alcohol, yeah.
Sex.
Sex, yeah.
Sex. And do I care who I have sex with? Do I have to love them? No.
Don't exist in these rules.
Sex. Alcohol. Junk food.
But other
Oh, yeah.
people to make me feel better.
Okay, so you enter addictions with people.
People pleasing?
I just want to be with a man who makes me feel good all the time and I never cry. He just, I'm
And if I
his
feel
princess.
afraid or I feel scared or I feel unhappy, he's got to cheer me up. But particularly if I feel unhappy, he's got to cheer me up.
Codependent.
So instead of him saying, go for it, girl, go for, and have some cries, you know, that
Well,
really
then
makes you angry
I'd
when he
be
says
very
that. You know? when he says, I'll help you, you don't have to cry, then, oh, I feel loved now.
So, and it's not, we're saying codependence because I might have to do something for him to do that, but I might not even have to. He might just be a guy who wants to please women, so I'm just a user then, aren't I, really? Yeah? Using.
Compete.
Sorry?
Compete.
Compete?
Compete? Why do I compete? If I'm avoiding crime.
So I'll probably compete on an emotional level where you're crying and I'm not, so I'm better than you.
That's what I was thinking.
I've got control,
Yeah.
you haven't got control of your feelings.
So I start to harm people in the same way that I've been harmed, don't I? Yeah. So I compete and condescend about emotions.
Yeah.
Intellectualize.
Yes?
Yes.
Like, yes. So what does that mean to me? It's like anything that is an emotion, I'm going to reframe it and make it into a logical decision.
Intellectualize.
So-
and, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
You go back.
No problem.
What does that do to my, if I'm intellectualizing all the time, what's that like in my relationships? Do I have a good connection with people?
No.
I'm in my head. What about when I go out in nature or, I don't feel anything, do I? I'm numbing, aren't I? Yeah? Yeah. Yeah, what else do I do?
But remember, this is about grief. So
Yeah.
what do you do with your grief?
So anytime there might be something sad or suppressed.
So you want power over grief.
Yeah.
So that means every time you're presented with grief, you're going to be angry instead of grieving.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you'll be very prone to being angry a lot. But many men are like this, aren't they? Very prone to being angry because they've been told they're not allowed to cry, right? Yeah.
Wouldn't depression, which is anger towards yourself?
Well, no, depression isn't anger towards yourself.
Oh.
Depression is just anger that you need to suppress.
So
Right?
if
So
I
the psychologist.
Because most people who are depressed are not angry with themselves, they're angry with others.
or angry about crying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So rage, depression, yep.
It's always suppression of anger, not sadness.
Suppression of anger.
Oh,
The
but
depression is
depression is always a suppression of
Anger.
anger,
Anger.
not sadness.
Correct.
Oh.
And you're saying it's towards others, not yourself,
Correct.
because the psychologist says.
Anybody who's lived with a
yourself.
depressed person knows this.
Yeah.
Everybody who's ever lived with a depressed person knows that most of the time you're the person who's they're angry with. Yeah?
It's an angry desire for control over emotion.
Yeah.
So if I'm avoiding feeling made fun of when I cried, I could very well get depressed. Yes.
Yeah.
What else?
Make jokes.
Yes.
Very good one. Men use that a lot, don't they?
Joke.
The kids do it all the time.
And what do women feel attracted to with men a lot of
Oh,
times?
he's so funny.
He's got such a good sense of humour.
Top of the list, isn't it?
He helps me avoid my sadness with his humour.
Yeah.
That is so funny. Does that anxiety fall under that, like fear?
Yeah,
anxiety?
can be. I can be anxious as well.
I'm not allowed to do that, so I'm just gonna freak out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and anxious is often panic, isn't it? Remember Jesus at the beginning talked about panic?
Yeah.
It's like this, oh, I've just got to get away from
Yeah.
my experience.
From my experience.
Yeah.
Could the person also be somebody?
I'll just go.
What about trying to relieve the crying of others, making
Correct.
other people feel
Correct.
good?
Massive. I'm going to be so good at that, aren't I? Because I definitely don't want to cry, so I don't want
So
you to
whenever
cry.
when someone around me starts crying, I go, there, it's all right, everything's fine, reframe it all.
It's gonna
You
be
know,
okay.
And if that
It's not
doesn't,
that bad.
if that-
Somebody just died, but it's not that bad. You know, you'll get over it in 3 months.
they're in a better place. And what do I do if that doesn't work? So I'm a good comforter and
Seeming. It's not really
suppressor,
comfortable.
let's call it suppressing. And what happens if my sort of nicey ways of suppressing don't work?
Don't work.
Then you tackle.
Yeah, then you attack. Yeah. So it's a lot about control, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm actually controlling my environment and other people's experience.
And their emotions. And attempt to
experience
control
of
their
emotions.
emotions.
Or ignore them.
Yeah, or ignore them. Or just say, well, I don't want them in my life anymore. They're just too sad for me.
They're too emotional, they're crying.
Oh.
They cry.
So is that kind of like when you say if the suppressing there doesn't work, we go into attack mode? So let's just say Daniela's father died,
Yeah.
and I live with her.
Yeah, and she's been crying for 3 months.
And it was from from trying to comfort her to finally will you
Yeah.
get over it?
Yeah.
I'm sick of you on the couch. Come on.
Come
get
on, get
with
off your
yourself.
backside and get, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, mind you, they should get off their backside, and they shouldn't be grieving at all, really, if they had the right beliefs, should they? But again, we don't think of it that way. We're thinking of it selfishly and going, I just don't want to be reminded of someone crying all the time.
Yes. Yeah. We're not really loving them. Yep.
But demands on others to make us feel good?
Yes.
Not
Yeah. So this. Yeah. Like the using others to
To cheer yourself up.
Yeah.
Yep.
And demanding of others. Yeah.
Therapy.
Therapy can also be an addiction, can't it? In what way?
The therapist doesn't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
I can be using them.
And oftentimes
to get
people
away.
are attracted to being a therapist because they like to calm down other people's emotions.
Or the talking, like talking to you.
Yeah, that's right. Talk without feeling.
It's similar to
Yeah, so
intellectualize, isn't it?
It's like talking without feeling is like a pressure cooker. You sort of have a pressure cooker of all the emotions in you, and when you talk about it, you just sort of, lift the lid off and a bit of steam comes out, enough for you to put it back down again, and then hold on to the emotion for another 5 years. Yeah, which is often what talk therapy is, helping you hold on to the emotion for longer.
Yeah. So talking without feeling, we've got there.
Yeah.
Put therapy in that basket. What else?
Going into fantasy, reading or watching.
Escapism.
Video games.
Yes.
Men are very prone to video games.
Fantasy.
Books.
I like your word.
Fantasy.
Fantasy.
Fantasy, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think We could keep going, couldn't we?
We could. So, but if you can see, all of these things are sins, aren't they? I'm using rage at myself or others. I'm distracting. I'm not engaging my free will choices. I'm living a very passive life. Drugs, sex, alcohol, junk food, indiscriminately, any way to avoid. Competing with others, condescending, harming others in the way I've been harmed, controlling others, using others, being numb, intellectualizing, getting away from my own lived experience. All of these are my sins. These are all my sins. So this tiny bit of pain
Could have been felt.
I could have chosen at any point to just have a good cry about the fact that someone was really nasty to me about my feelings when I was 3 or 4 or 5.
Yeah.
But I didn't. I chose to do all these other things
Instead.
that God attributes to me. I don't know where to stand. I'm a rookie at this. This is so wonderful. Yeah, so, and God's attributing all of that sin because that's, to me, because that's the use of my free will. Yeah. This is someone else's free will when they made fun of me. And it got locked up in me.
Yeah.
But I had the choice to feel that, but instead I do all these things. And usually, if we look at them, we're doing them on a daily, if not hourly basis.
Yeah.
Just wanted to ask the reverse. So, are we to assume that if you are doing these things, then it's really this one sin, or could this also be related to another sin?
Yeah, we could.
Okay.
Let's put something
so
else
it's
in
not
there.
just like one-to-one that.
No.
Okay.
This is I do this.
It's very personal what you choose to
Yes,
do.
and it's very personal what you're avoiding.
That is,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes.
But it has the same, or it might have similar or the same results.
Yeah, you might. This
Yeah.
is you.
Let's
This
say
is really.
the parents made fun of me playing with myself sexually.
Yeah. Of
Right? So
sexual
of
exploration.
masturbation. Right. So then I might do a whole heap of things,
Which is the same.
which may end up being similar, mightn't they, or different, depending on how I express myself to a large degree. Yeah.
Okay.
And really, we're saying when I call these things your sin, these are actually the effects of your sin. These are the actions you're taking of your sin. Your sin is, I shouldn't have to feel this thing. But because these things are all me engaging my will and often affecting the free will choices of others, that
I even start now using them to develop more false beliefs.
more justifications for
Does that
my
make sense?
feelings.
I start using what I do to create more false beliefs. So let's say, an example is, let's say I start taking some drugs, but it's just marijuana.
Yeah.
So I start, what do they call it in other places? Plant medicine. Yeah, which is all quite strange. But let's say I start taking marijuana, and then I start feeling like it's not enough. It's not enough. But also in marijuana, you're going to be you're going to be very open to spirit influence.
Spirits.
So now I'm potentially going to attract some spirits who want me to keep taking drugs, right? And different kinds of drugs, and increase the intensity of the drugs and increase the type of drugs. Or I'll attract some spirits who want to take control of my body even, and then I get schizophrenia as a result. You know, so
Or they might want me to take risks, like risk taking,
like
that I wouldn't
mountain
otherwise
climbing
engage.
without ropes, and you know, all these other things that often people do. You know, and so we're actually then having more beliefs, like so we're creating more false beliefs, which then will feed into more future things that we choose to do. So it's sort of like, you could say that every decision point we're making from a free will position is like a turning point. And how far you turn will determine how ready you are to make the next turn with the next decision point. So you might think you're just making an innocent turn, like, in this place I'm just gonna, just avoid having a cry. Innocent thing to do. But then you make that turn, and now you're on a different trajectory of your life, And then something else comes up, and now you're feeling like, I want to do something else with my sadness. Like, I want to feel happy instead of feeling sad. So now I make another turn, which might be a moral turn. Like, I decide, I can have sex with anybody I want, whenever I want, that kind of thing, because that cheers me up, makes me feel good.
Or
So-
just sexually project.
or
I'm just
just-
going to
yeah,
sexually project.
Project somebody. And sexual projection at somebody eventually potentially leads to sexual activity. So now I've made another turn, and another turn, and another turn. And before I know it, I might have been taking a fairly straight trajectory with my life, but then and if you think of down here as the hills, and up here is the heavens, sort of thing. Like, up here is love, and down here is everything opposite to love. I'm making little turn, little turn, little turn, little turn, and each time, because they're small turns, I'm not seeing the enormity of the direction I'm heading. I'm just thinking, it's just a little choice, a little decision. And this is what's also happened in the environment. Most of us don't realise how damaged our environment is, because over centuries, mankind has made these little turn, little turn, little turn, little turn, little turn. And what we're looking at now has nothing to do with what was here 200, 300, 400 years ago, right? And we're just thinking it's normal when it's far removed from normal. And it's the same with regard to our feelings. We make these little turns, little turns, little turns, and then 10 or 15 or 20 years down the track, we go, how in the hell did I end up here?
Yeah, I can have no relationship or bad relationship with my kids. I can have a drug problem, a porn problem, all this kind of pain in my life. I don't like my job even. I feel bound financially. All these kind of pains that are everyday pains. And we can't say, oh, no, that's because someone made fun of me when I was little.
It's actually because I made a whole series of small decisions and choices over a period of time that led me down a track. And each choice and decision was based on an immoral choice, a sin-based choice, and it led me down a track to end up where I am now. Right.
And each one of those little things that you were talking about, is each one of them is that emotion that we need to work through to clear it.
Well, you could almost
Can
say
you go
that each
higher?
point of decision was a point in time where I could have gone, hang on a sec, all I need to do is deal with my grief and I will stop making these decisions.
Yeah.
So you could almost say every one of them was a potential turning point, and yet it had to get more severe before it became such.
But if you hit, like, let's say 5th down the row, one
Yeah.
of those spots,
Yep,
it will, and finally say, okay, no, I'm gonna confront it and I'm gonna
Yeah.
deal with it, right?
yep.
Does that gonna also clear the previous 5? Like, will it
Well,
clear the
it
chain
depends,
reaction?
doesn't it,
Yeah.
on whether you recognise or are aware of the sins you've now committed or not.
Uh-huh.
See, a lot of times what you try to do is you try to blank out from your mind that you did a whole heap of sins, because what you're thinking in this space is, I'm hurting, but you're not considering how everybody else is hurting from what you did. You're only considering how you're hurting from what you did. So what you do is you get to that point and you're going, I'm hurting now, I've got to stop. What do I stop? Oh, let's go back and try to deal with my, parents making fun of me about something. Let's go back to that, right? And so you try to go back to that, but now you're skipping over all the false beliefs that you've created, and you're skipping over all the things you did in the sin to harm others.
So each of these things I did is harming not just me, but other people.
Yeah.
And I actually have a justification, don't I? I have a spiritual belief that's supporting all of these actions.
Yeah.
So in order to correctly deal with this, I can't just jump back to feeling that, because I've already had this spiritual belief that's leading me further and further and further away from that. I need to deal with my justification or my spiritual sin that we keep talking about. I shouldn't have to feel this, or if I feel this, I will die, or other people should deal with what they did to me, not me. All these things cause us to rationalize and justify all of these
But that's
things.
in addition to all these rationalizations.
Yeah.
So you have to also deal with these rationalizations
Yeah.
on top of all the
Yeah,
other
now-
Well, when you
impacts
get
that it
once-
has.
Can we say though that the easiest thing to deal with is that? The
Once-
hardest thing to deal with is all the things you now did, avoiding that.
Avoiding it, okay.
And this
Yeah,
is
that's
why
the
it
point, yeah.
creates so much pain, because you're actually acting and justifying and justifying and acting and acting and justifying. So you're actually reinforcing falsehoods to yourself every time you do that, because you're saying, that's right, I can't possibly feel it. That's right, they should have to deal with it. That's right, mine is a special case. I should be able to just eat the ice cream and go hiking or whatever you do. And all of that is saying, I can't possibly deal with this. When you clear all that stuff away, you'll be like, oh, what a relief, I can feel this and it won't be hard.
It'd be easy.
So that's why you say go to the spiritual belief first, because
Yes.
that's this.
That's right.
That's your spiritual belief.
Your spiritual belief is causing all your sin. The original
Yes.
problem that other people sinned
Right.
with you, that's not the cause
That's not the sin.
of all your sin. It's the choices you made dealing with that original thing.
So what are those spiritual things? Why do you choose to do all these things? What do you tell yourself in order to justify doing all these things? That's the beliefs you have to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're emotional and they're usually spiritual
Yeah.
in nature.
Always.
What's
Yeah.
the spiritual, I'm so sorry. What's the spiritual sin for choosing not to grieve?
Well, it
There's
depends on
the
quite
who.
a lot. There's quite a lot.
Oh,
I just listed some of them. Other people should have to deal with what they did to me. Mine is a special case. Doesn't anyone know how hard this is for me? Which is a lack of equality.
It's impossible for me to feel.
I-
Is fundamentally the biggest one, because you're sinning against your own soul's ability to feel.
and it's
God-
not a truth.
It's not a truth, no. God created you to feel. In fact, every experience you ever have will be stored as feelings. Remember we said yesterday how the sensory apparatus works and how it mixed with the emotion, and that creates the memory of the experience and that gets stored in your soul? Well, that's what we're talking about here. It's like there's this whole sensory apparatus that occurred to have an experience, but now you're creating experiences that are sin-based experiences. So not based upon anything other than trying to avoid your soul, right? And whenever a human attempts to avoid what's in their soul, they will definitely create a large number of sins. Yeah.
It's inevitable.
It's inevitable.
Yeah. Because you're sinning against your own soul. Jaren, and then we'll go to Karen.
I don't know if this might be more helpful, is if, for instance, like, if we sort of go backwards, and say, oh, so here's this big sin in my life. And I wonder how I work backwards to finally feel through all of those things to finally get to that. I'm willing to use what I shared with you yesterday as an example for everybody else to go, oh, okay, so this is how we do it if we have
You're
this.
presuming you're doing the right thing in sharing, in what you're sharing.
Okay.
Oh no,
And you're not.
you're talking about a sin that you're engaging now, and you're saying, how do I get back to the original thing I was avoiding?
No, you're saying you have an example to give.
Is it of a sin or of a way that you've dealt
So
with
go
it?
ahead, an example, and we'll
Let's-
pick at the pieces for you.
Let's
Perfect.
Okay,
All right. Yep.
Okay, so
I
we're
need
going to
it,
start
I need
then
it.
here at the
Okay.
sin.
Because I need to be more aware of my stuff, right? So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
no, this is a good thing.
It is.
All right,
I
let's
was
do this.
only half joking when I said it's a dream come true.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
so, all right, so, the example I wanted to use.
Yes.
So that we could go work backwards to see where it goes and how to even heal my own thing.
Yeah.
So about 2021, is when I engaged in, an affair with a married man.
Okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
So you could say that's an effect.
Yes.
Yes.
And so I'm like, okay, that is my sin, my biggest skeleton in my closet.
No, it's not the biggest, but
No,
go on.
so
Okay,
your
that's
action,
what I'm aware of.
your
It's
action,
the biggest one you're aware of,
Yes.
which is not the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
so your action is an affair with a married man.
So you could say that's the effect of your sin.
Okay.
It's not actually your sin because that's the action you're taking.
Yeah. The sin, remember, is an emotion that exists inside of you. And in the case of an affair, there's often lots of different emotions inside of you, isn't there? As to why you feel you need one.
So why do you feel like you need it? What's your justification?
What did it give you?
Yeah.
It made me feel alive.
Okay, so it got you out of feeling numb?
And bored.
Were you and bored? Yeah, so you felt more
Excited.
excited.
Yes.
Yeah, made you feel excited.
Special.
Special, okay.
I
Excitement.
feel special, yep.
Excited.
What else?
Connected.
Connected to him?
Connected like
To yourself,
to myself.
to your feelings, to your sexual feelings or just other feelings?
Other feelings like
What kind of feelings?
like we share the same this is the first person in my whole life
Yeah.
where we love the same music. Like
Yeah.
all music I love, he loves like the
Yeah,
majority
crap,
of it.
total crap, go on.
Yeah, there's no one else on earth who likes your music.
Or
but you-
like, oh, we have the same love for poplar trees, and oh, we have the, you know, like, this person's just
Yeah.
like me, you know?
Yeah, no, you fake most of that anyway,
Yeah,
but go on.
So,
Did you hear that?
did he fake most of it?
Yeah.
Well, you know, what would you do? You get sex and it's, you know, it's exciting.
I like pop
No, the sex is not exciting, that's the worst part of the
Well, obviously it was for him enough to cheat on his wife.
Yep. Can I say I feel seen? Is
Yes.
really what you're
Yes.
talking about there.
Can you see it's not really about sex in a way, is it?
Yes.
No, it's about other things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What about how are we justifying having sex with a married man or having an emotional connection with a married man? Why is that okay to you?
Because he was disconnected from his
Oh, so you're helping him out.
Yeah,
It's a common thing, I'm not.
so you're like providing
A service.
something for him that his wife isn't providing. Is that your feeling?
I don't know if I thought that thought.
Yeah, but it's a competition feeling between you and another woman, right?
Yeah.
You see
I'm
that?
winning in the competition is really what it is.
I'm providing things that his wife can't.
I can't understand why he can't spell up. I can't spell up. Competition with women. Let's. I'm the better woman, the chosen woman.
The chosen one.
Yeah.
The one he thinks is more special.
For sure.
That kind of
Chosen.
Right.
Special. Yep. What else?
What else? He's the funniest person I have ever like.
Got a good sense of humor. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have never laughed harder and as much with any human being ever.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're really saying it's okay to break morals if I feel good, if I'm laughing.
If I'm happier.
Yeah.
If it makes me happier.
I never consciously thought of any of
Correct.
these things.
That's right. But we're trying to look at why you're justifying it and sort of reflecting to you what you're saying about it.
Yeah, and it's important to understand that when you're in it, see, the addiction just drives you to the action. You barely even think of what the motivation is, and most of us don't even know our own addictions. But we sort of just have them every day without even. In fact, most of us think they're just a part of our personality.
Yeah, we think that's me. Like I'm being
Yeah.
seen. He's seeing me. This is a part of me, we think.
Yeah, but it's actually, oftentimes we engage addictions without thought because there is no thought to it. There is only feelings to it. And so we do things that later we regret, but while we're doing them, we don't regret them. We think they're good. That's why we do them. Yeah. Now, Mary's only listed a few because we could list more.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what is it you wanted to say?
I guess because when we were looking at the other stuff
Yeah.
of like how that small thing became all these other things,
Yeah.
and now I'm pretty sure most of us are wondering, okay, so well, how do we, when we look at all the problems and issues and sins in our lives, how do we work backwards and heal and process so that we can.
Well, let's do it, shall we?
Yeah,
Let's do it. So here.
Or like, do we go backwards, or no, we don't go backwards?
Well, when you say backwards, it's really forwards, but
Yeah.
anyway, let's do it. These things indicate that I have certain beliefs
Yes. That's
that
what I was
are
trying
actually false from God's perspective, but that I have them. So what are the beliefs that I have?
So these are some of the feelings.
So these are
that
the
you have.
feelings
But what do you?
where I felt like, oh, I did it because it made me feel this good thing and that good thing and this good thing and that good thing. All good things is what we're thinking.
I'm chosen. I'm a special
chosen,
woman.
I'm special, I'm excited, I feel seen, I feel
There's a
understood, there's a connection, we laugh together,
yeah.
with joy, there's happy, I'm happier, it's better. You see, all of these things I'm saying to myself are good. All right? So that's the very first thing I need to bear in mind is that I generally don't do things that are sins unless I think they're good.
I think they're serving me in some way.
Yeah, I think it's great that I do it, right?
And also, I've never experienced this before.
Okay, yeah. So never experienced sort of some kind of emotional connectedness with a man in particular, I gather.
Well,
It was a man.
sorry, yes.
So the action was the affair, which you now feel a bit like, oh, a bit of shame.
Well, I don't know if you feel it.
Have some happiness. Well, when we're talking about it, you do.
You
but
feel a bit
don't.
like, ooh.
But the rest of
but,
us.
but when it's happening, you're not actually yet feeling bad about it.
Because you're feeling all these things which you think are good.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a very good indication you're in addiction, right? That you're feeling just good about doing all of these things because it all makes you feel good. But what fundamental spiritual beliefs must you have to have the affair, justifying the affair for this purpose? Chris, you want
I
to
can
start?
make my own moral rules.
I can make my own moral rules.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to write this.
So I'm my own lawmaker. Back to the still on the board, is it? Was, yeah.
Oh, do you want to?
No.
I'm my own lawmaker.
Yeah.
Morality, societies or gods doesn't apply to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I get that, I'm allowed to do that.
That's
But if I get pain and suffering, then I think, oh, that was bad. But if I get what I think is pleasure, I go, oh, that was good.
Morals don't apply if I'm happy.
Yeah.
Because they're superior.
As long as I'm happy, by the way, isn't it? So there has to be also a moral, a spiritual belief about me versus the wife.
Yeah, what is that?
So what's that?
Superiority or
I have to feel like I am superior.
Yeah, that's good.
I am superior.
Yeah. And that my joy outweighs her pain.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like that my joy is worth her pain. Yeah. It would be different, of course, if you said to the guy, I'm not going to have sex with you, I'm not going to have this relationship with you, and tell your wife. He goes and tells his wife, they break up, and then you start your relationship. That would have been different, wouldn't it?
Would you have done it then?
Probably wouldn't be so exciting then.
Sorry, could you repeat what you just said?
This is why we have a recording.
Let's say I recognise that I'm attracted to the guy. I go up to him and say, I'm attracted to you. I want you to break up with your wife and be with me instead.
But isn't that a sin too?
Why is that a sin?
Because you're forcing somebody or you're putting
No, you're
them.
just presenting an option
It's
to
an
him.
option. Yeah.
And he's allowed to make a choice to leave his wife, isn't he, and be with you?
My joy is more important than her pain. I'm going to put that. Yeah.
So would you still want it then, if he left his wife?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
question was,
that's
would
the
you
question.
still want it if it wasn't exciting?
If it was in the if I presented that in the beginning,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because that ended up being presented
Yeah.
afterward.
Yeah.
But by that point, because I was like, oh, there's a whole bunch of reasons why as much as I still want to be with you,
Yeah.
I don't, because if we are together permanently, eventually we'll have to come to the truth with your kids.
Yeah.
Be like, oh, like, so
Yeah.
this is the woman I had an affair with.
You have to deal with life.
Yes, like,
And you
I
were in
left
a-
all of you guys for her, and also the
Well,
pressure.
exactly. You didn't want life. What you wanted was, what did
It was
Elsa call it? Fantasy.
Fantasy.
You wanted a fantasy.
Because if you wanted reality, as soon as you started the engagement with him, you would have had that feeling. You would have thought, well, if I have an affair, then how's this going to work out? And
Yeah.
but you were sort of seduced by these other exciting feelings.
And then also that massive pressure of, oh my goodness, if you actually leave, now that we've engaged in an affair to begin with,
Yeah.
if you were to, you were to leave your family, for me,
Yeah.
I would feel this immense pressure that
Why?
we have to make it work. I have to
Why?
make it work. Because if I
Because you
don't-
destroyed somebody else's relationship.
Exactly, and so I need to make sure you're like.
But you're already
happier.
destroying their
You've
relationship.
already done that. You just want the illusion that you haven't done that.
Correct. So what's another one? A spiritual belief. If I can make out something, it's not real.
Yeah, my definition of reality is, my version of reality.
Remember
is
the
God's.
God emotions here. See how many of them match? I am the lawmaker. I am God. I am better.
I
Humility is
define
weakness.
truth.
I define what is real. It's all happening here.
Yeah.
Makes sense?
And that's
I
also
want
different
fantasy,
from
not reality.
It's all coming from? Yeah, really coming from a state of arrogance, but also from a state where you believe that your joy is worth the sin. There's a fundamental concept that the sin is not going to bring me pain.
Yeah, my pleasure won't lead to
My
sinful
my
pleasure.
sin won't lead to pain. Is the fundamental concept. Not to my pain, but trust me, it's going to lead to your pain. Even though you think it's not, there is going to be quite a lot of pain coming from this kind of events.
I almost feel like it's a half question. What if she had a sexual relationship with a man before she found out that he's actually married or that he's in a relationship? Because that happens quite often.
Well, that's true, it does, but you see, why would I enter a sexual relationship with a person that I barely know? Can you see there's also
There's a
moral
whole
problems
other
with
set
that?
of beliefs.
You see,
Like that.
if I meet Mary and I think she's attractive and everything, and I think she's pretty hot and whatever, and I want to, get together with her, if I was loving, I would get to know her life, what she does with her life, who's in her life,
What I love,
what her
what I
history
do.
is,
Yeah.
where she comes from, what she's currently doing, her job and her passions and her desires, and I wouldn't have sex with her before I knew those things. You understand?
Yeah.
I would at least get to know that. Now, if I am driven to have sex with someone I barely know, can you see? There's got to be a sin in that, because I'm not knowing the person. I'm not wanting to be with the person because I know them or understand them. I'm wanting to be with the person because they meet my addictions, which is very selfish. So all this hookup stuff, it's all sin, because I'm not even wanting to know the person. I'm just wanting to get a sexual or an emotional feeling, which is not the same as loving somebody. So if I love Mary and I would want to get to know her, I'd want to understand her, I'd want to understand how she thinks and how she feels and what drives her and what passions she has, and I would, in that process, sooner or later find out she's married. Wouldn't I? It'd be pretty easy.
But often this internet,
Where do you live? Take me to your home.
They have the 20 questions, which are literally what sometimes right at the beginning.
Yeah, but again, you
get
can't
those,
just-
and people lie.
Of
And then
course they
after a
lie.
while, you find out that those 20 questions of like,
Take me
how
to where
to
you
know
live.
Sorry?
Take me to where you live.
To where I live, Washington DC.
No,
No, but that would be something, and you wouldn't.
you want to be lied to.
Yeah.
So don't give me this crap that you're being lied to. You want to be.
It's like, oh, you did the checklist, therefore we're fine.
Yeah, that's right.
And
It's like,
when does that
I
ever
want
work?
this relationship, so make sure the checklist works for me. It's like, and if he needs to lie to do that, then you'll let him lie.
Well, my issue is I am afraid of this.
Yeah.
So I am out of it. Like, I don't participate in it because of that, because of the fear.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
you,
but
lie
it's
to.
easy enough to work out whether somebody's lying.
you spend 2 hours with someone,
Well,
sincerely, you
but
would know a lot more than what the checklist says
But Dave, you're not
already.
going to be having sex with them in 2 hours.
No,
No,
but
no,
I'm saying you mustn't even be
3
spending
months
2 hours
later,
with them.
after you've got to know the person and seen where they live and see where they work and rocked up at their work and seen where they live and rocked up where they live and all those other things that would have gone on if you were really interested in having a permanent relationship with this person, you would have done all that, right? Then you would, of course, know a lot about their life. And it's very hard for them over 3 months to, if you are Well, where do you work? I want to go where you work. I'll rock up for lunch with you and have lunch with you at your work. Well, where do you know, so everybody in the work is going to know he's got an affair going on. Now you want to go where he's home. I'll make you dinner at home. You go, this is where I live. Where do you live? You know, I'll go and make dinner at home for you, or you can make dinner at home and I'll rock up at your home. How about that? Sounds like, and he's going, no. Pretty obvious. No, that's not going to be possible. And then every time you hook up, it's like, oh, it's a motel room or something. Pretty obvious. What's going on there? It's very obvious.
I live in Washington, D.C., where it's mostly military, so you cannot go to their work. No way to go and have lunch with them.
Now we're just using figure it all out.
I want to go back to this. Yeah.
I kind of understand from this exercise why we just want to go to cry about the thing from
We did the childhood. We just like put it in this little box, Jesus, my childhood.
Right.
I want to cry about that.
And then I don't have to.
Can you see that many people who hear Divine Truth initially go, oh, all I've got to do is have some cry about where I've been hurt. That's all I've got to do. I'll have a cry about how I've been hurt. It'll be over and done with. No, it will not. Where you've been hurt is not your sin. It's somebody else's. Where you've done all the hurting of other people, that's your sin. And that's the thing that's going to end up in your pain and suffering. So when you try to go, I'm going to do with my childhood thing and all done and isn't that lovely and now I don't sin anymore and all that crap.
Oh, who's ever done that?
It does not work. And the reason why it doesn't is because you have not seen all the labyrinth of sin-based concepts and beliefs, spiritual beliefs, that are now driving all behaviour that you're engaging that is your problem, not somebody else's problem.
So, Jaren, if we look at your example again, you've had the affair with the married man, and then you go, okay, well, I think that's probably a sin. You know, you sort of think, oh, that might be my
But
sin.
the feelings are, it's not one.
Yeah.
The feelings you're in are like,
So
no,
can you see-
it's awesome.
We're talking about it as a sin, but you don't even feel like it was one. Not in your feelings.
Not in your feelings yet, you know. You can sort of see logically of this action is probably not loving, but when you talk
To
about
somebody.
it,
To his family, you know.
to his family, I suppose you feel that. But
But also to
when
him and to yourself.
But when you talk about it, you don't see how unloving it is to you and to him.
Yeah.
And you're not yet connected to all these beliefs that are
That
actually
drove it.
driving you to justify the action.
Yeah.
These beliefs are the spiritual sins.
Yeah.
And when you deal with them, or as you deal with them, you might encounter some childhood experiences that you had
Which
shut
caused you to
down,
believe those
that
things.
caused you to form these spiritual sins. But there's no sort of jumping from, oh, I had an affair with a married man, here's my childhood issue. Because that, you wouldn't know yourself then.
Yeah.
I was that the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I thought this whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you want to say that louder.
Yeah.
I thought, I've been listening to this since 2016 and everything I thought was go back to my childhood.
Yeah.
The entire time.
Yeah.
I knew that I did things and I knew that was a problem, but I didn't know that I had to go to those first and go to there.
That's why we come on the tour.
That's why we have to talk.
Because we can feel that a lot of people
Yes. Yeah.
feel that way.
Yeah. And, you know, like, essentially, you are going to end up as a child feeling some things, but
But it will be a subsequent result of dealing with your sin.
yeah, wanting to become sincerely growing the desire in yourself to become a person who loves others and loves yourself will cause you to escalate a lot of these spiritual beliefs. And in that process, you will heal a lot of things from your past.
Yeah.
Not just your childhood, but your whole life.
Because if you think about it, the childhood issue, you might connect with some grief and sadness and other things, but if you think about it, these things which your childhood, obviously you've justified from your childhood that you're allowed to create these beliefs, right? Because otherwise you wouldn't even have them. So at some point in your history, you felt that you're allowed to create these beliefs and you're allowed to have them and you're allowed to keep them and you're allowed to base your life on them. At some point that's happened, even though many of you will say it wasn't conscious, but it often was. It often was conscious. So I sort of feel like, well, morals don't apply if I'm happy. Most people have that feeling by the time they're 12 or 13.
And there's a lot of anger. In dealing with that, you'll deal with a lot of anger. Because you feel like, well, that means I'm never happy. You have all these kind of ideas about what morality means. It means me being unhappy, and so you think they're opposites. And there's a lot of emotional work you do as you go through. What do you call that? Deconstruct them.
Yeah. Sort of unraveling the labyrinth or unraveling the big puzzle, which has become your sin.
Could you walk us through like the steps of this emotional process? Because I can imagine this, like you start out with anger, like I want to be my lawmaker, or I want my pleasure.
Jaren is at the beginning.
So you start out with it was really good. It was good fun.
It is kind of good, yeah.
That's where you start.
But then do you go to the anger, like I deserve this good?
No, because the anger will only come when you don't have the addictions met anymore. So
Jaren's not angry yet because she's still engaged in this.
Yeah. And you're not going to get angry until you realise what you did is it got penalties. And until you realise what those penalties are. You're probably not even going to get angry yet, right? And so, there's a lot of steps before you get to anger.
and also, it's not linear necessarily. It's not like, I'll do this and then I'll do that.
And can I say to you, Chris, your mind is saying, give me a rule, give me a rule, give me a rule, give me a rule.
You're like
by step.
Elizabeth.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to feel through it all. If you just give me a rule, I'll be able to work it out with my mind. And remember, all the sin is in your heart, not your mind. So that's going to be a problem if that's the attitude. You see, you're not going to probably deal with any of it with that attitude, because you're going to think you've dealt with it, or think you've found it, or think that it's worked out, or hope that it's worked out. And in your mind, you can get very hopeful that, it's all over now. I've done a bit of crying a few days here. Should be all over now. That kind of thinking, you can get that in your mind, and then once you get that in your mind, you're going to dismiss the rest of the process. You're going to have to go through a process where it's at the moment, there is a thing of, it was good. So that's just where you start. You're thinking, with all your addictions, you think they're good. And if you didn't think they were good, you wouldn't do them. So you do think they're good. So with all addictions, you think they're good. And then what you need to do now is go, is it good?
And guys, this is why you need God's principles or God's guidance in this, because otherwise you end up just crying about stuff that, the affair ended, I'm so rejected. This is, that's my childhood issue, it's rejection. But no, it's, I think I'm God, it's really difficult to deal with, and this is where having some education from God and, from us about the principles can help you to unravel your false beliefs, your addictions. This is a lot of the work you're going to do.
This is the hard work, which most people don't want to do, right? Because this is the work you have to do without God's love. Because you can't get God's love until you become sincere about it being a sin. So this is the work you're going to have to do without God's love. You're going to have to do it not necessarily on your own, because you have helpers, spirits who are trying to help you. God can help you through the conscience. You have people on earth who want to help you through things. But at the end of the day, you will have to do it alone to the point where you're repentant, and then God's love can come. Right?
It's like God wants you to understand how powerful your will is, You've engaged your will, not just to have the affair, but to develop these beliefs and let them run your life. So that's how strong your will is. You're going to have to engage your will to undo those things, to reach a place of repentance. And at the end of that, you will be very confident of how powerful your will is to create destruction, to create in a good way, to bring about happiness. But if you just sort of have a little cry about your childhood and everything's fixed, you really haven't understood your will, have you?
The principle of responsibility is big in this too.
Yeah.
Lack of responsibility
for actions.
It doesn't matter.
The matter, no.
Doesn't-
And
It doesn't mean that I'm gonna hurt the wife or.
as long as I'm happy,
Yeah, yeah.
who cares?
My actions shouldn't have consequences is really part of this spiritual belief
Yeah,
here.
it is. Yeah. And then, you know, every action you take, no matter what it is, has a consequence. Everyone. God created a universe where there's consequences for everything you do.
So that
every
means
single
good or
thing.
bad,
Sorry?
right? Good or bad.
Good or bad. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. It depends on how. If it was sin, the consequence is going to be bad. If it's love, it's going to be good. Yeah. But there are going to be consequences one way or the other. Yeah.
It's so important to understand the law, isn't it? Again, I'm getting that more
Yeah.
and more and more.
Yeah.
Because that obey, disobey line, that law is not wavering.
It's
No.
not.
It's not wavering. I've figured that out. That is not gonna waver.
No.
So it does make a
But
lot
some
of
of
sense.
our emotions are, it should.
Yes.
You know,
Right, right.
We've been brought up
Exactly.
as children to believe
Yes.
negotiation with mum and dad works sometimes.
If I self-attack, mum backs off. So if I self-attack with God, the law should waver, or
That's right.
you know.
Or I should get what I want, because I
Yeah.
want it.
Yeah,
I mean-
that's right. And if I screamed enough with my mum and dad, I did get what I wanted. So if I scream enough at God, He should give me what I want too. You know, those kind of feelings
Yeah.
that we all have, which are all spiritual beliefs that get established, joined with those feelings.
Yeah.
I just want to comment. So one of the checks I have for myself when I'm aware enough, I would say, would I do this again? So in this case here, I would ask myself, would I do this again? But if I would do this again, I haven't addressed anything.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
haven't
that's right.
done anything.
Yeah.
That's right.
So the comment was, one of the checks that Gene does for himself is, would I do that again? And if the answer is yes, I haven't dealt with it.
Yeah, good.
A question is, when you're praying to God to help you about all that stuff, like in the stage before you get to divine love,
Yeah.
does God have any like preparatory substance? Like I know you said He helps with the conscience and other things, but
Yeah.
is it like how does that work from?
Whenever you have a true, sincere longing to address something, but you're not yet in a state where you can receive love, God will make sure you get extra spirit assistance when you pray for it, and make sure that other things occur, like on earth in terms of attractions, that God creates some attractions for you so that you can actually deal with the issue.
So that you can become more aware or more awakened, you know, move through that aware to awaken
Yeah.
process.
So let's say you prayed about solving this as an issue, and you prayed about it sincerely, that you want to see some of the results of your actions, right? Because at the moment you think all of your actions are happy, but then let's say you met the wife accidentally at the supermarket, right? And she looked at you and then come up to you and started screaming at you, and you know.
Or even just she didn't know when you ran into her, you would feel something.
Yeah.
And then imagine she knew, and you met.
Or imagine that you're driving past accidentally sometime past his work, and you see his wife and his 2 children. I don't know if he does, but let's say he did, right? And then you started to feel about what's it like for the wife and the children that he's had an affair with me. You know, these kind of things can help open you up to what it felt like for other people other than you. Does that make sense? Yes. So, but for the most part, most of us go, I don't want to know any of that, right? Because all I want to know is it was great. And so we don't pray to be enlightened, to be shown the reality of anything we've done. But if you were sincere, you could, couldn't you?
If you sincerely ask to be shown the full consequence and full implications for you, him and everyone else of what you've done, you would meet people who their husbands had an affair, you'd meet other people who had affairs, you'd have dreams.
You'd have dreams about your own condition, seeing yourself in the mirror,
all
sorts of things, and how it affected your condition. All sorts of things would start coming up if you were sincere and wanted to actually work through the issue.
So this is like praying for truth, really. Where you're praying for more awareness. You're praying. God definitely answers those sincere prayers.
Is that because that's my question? I think after so many years of listening to you guys, it just now hit me that what does it really mean, sincere longing and prayer?
Yeah.
Because I feel like I've been sincerely longing, and
Yeah.
I've been praying, and now I'm questioning, But I've really been.
Well, see, if we're not engaged in this process of like, how am I loving others? How am I sincere?
If it's all about me,
If it's just like, I want my pain to go away, God, you know.
am I really very sincere?
It was a little bit deeper, but maybe not as far as that.
Yeah. But also, if you think about the idea that I can long for God's love and receive it, if you think about that idea for a moment, you got to remember that God measures every sincerity, every feeling you have, and He measures it perfectly accurately. The law, which is a set of mathematical principles, measure it down to the decimal point, you could say, of how much sincerity you actually have. You know?
Can I know that? Can I feel?
Well, it's very hard for you to know your own sincerity.
God's response. God's
response is proof of your sincerity. So if there's no love coming from God at all, even though you think you've had sincerity, it means you did not. You understand?
Yeah.
So the measure is the outcome. Now, of course, a lot of people then go, oh, well, I'll get some love from the Spirit instead. Well, you can do that if you want, but it's not going to be from God and it's not going to help you very much. Right? So a lot of people want to fool themselves then. They're not feeling the love from God. And instead of going, oh, that's because I'm insincere, because of my inability to become aware of sin, I'm insincere. Instead of saying that to themselves, they go, oh, it must be because, God's not hearing me very well, or, I think I'm sincere, so I'll just keep trying the way I'm currently doing it, because I think maybe just God's not listening today, and none of these things are true, of course, but these are all things we tell ourselves, right, in order to avoid the reality that we're not receiving, therefore we're not sincere. Does that make sense?
Sort of, yeah, because I feel like I am asking for the sincere longing. I'm not getting it, so my internal thing says...
So you're asking for the sincere longing, or you're asking for love?
God's love,
right?
And also for longing.
God's not going to give you a sincere longing.
No, that's an expression of your will. Now we're back to your will and desire.
Yeah, this is why I asked the difference, you see, because if you're asking for love now, that is something God can do. But if you're asking for you having a sincere longing, He's going to wait until you have one.
That's up to you. And that's up to you, daughter.
And this is how it never happens.
That's right. A lot of times we start to go, well, I don't know if I do have a sincere longing, but if I ask God for a sincere longing, maybe He will give me one. No, He won't, because a sincere longing is a development of your own free will. You're not going to get one by asking for it. It's going to be something you're going to have to develop for yourself, right? And God will measure it mathematically whether it's happening. So God knows when it's happening and when it isn't. There are moments in your life where you might have one and you will receive a response, but there'll be long periods of your life when you're in a state of sin where you think you have one and you won't. And you've got to work through your sin in order to have one.
And if you don't receive a response, you go, okay, I've got more work to do.
Yeah, and that's when I get stuck. I'm like, okay, but I thought I was doing something, so what am I doing wrong? And then it's like the guilty feeling.
But often that's just anger of like, no, I am sincere. Why isn't this working?
It's not working.
Yeah, and also the whole, what am I doing wrong? Well, it's quite obvious you're not sincere, so that's what you're doing wrong. But let's be more specific.
So obvious when you say it, but if I'm doing it, it doesn't come out.
Yeah, let's be more specific. Like, when you say I'm doing something wrong, do you really want to know what you're doing wrong?
I think I do, and I tell myself, but apparently not, because it's not happening, right?
That's right. That's right.
And that's where I'm like in this catch-22.
We're not sincere about dealing with our sin. That's what we're doing wrong. We're not sincere about our... See, most of us have beliefs about love that are completely flawed. Right? So one of the beliefs we often have about love is that if I ask for love, I should be given it, even if I'm not sincere. Because that's often what happened in your childhood, right? You asked for something and you got it even when you didn't really feel like you wanted it.
You just put on a pretty face and went, oh, mommy, please. and then you got something, and it wasn't really, you didn't have a feeling of it being a gift, or that it was just something you knew. If I put on a cutie face, someone will give me something, and I'm manipulating, really. And that's not, sorry, go.
No.
That's not a sincere longing. That's trying to manipulate and learning how to manipulate it. Most kids
and
learn
how
it pretty
arrogant
young.
it is that you think you can manipulate God. Like, as if like God knows every thought, every feeling, and you reckon you're going to get away with that? You know, but with people, of course, you can do it, right? You could do it with your mum and dad. In fact, many of you learnt by the time you were 5 years old how you could manipulate your mum and dad. You even learnt how to manipulate your mum against your dad and your dad against your mum. You even learnt that, right? No, God, dad and mum, is together, one being, and you're not going to be able to manipulate one against the other, or God against himself, or God against his laws, or, you know, it's all going to be mathematically measured perfectly as to what's going on.
Sadly, it's an arrogance we learn from when we're very small.
Yeah.
And this is part of developing sincerity, is coming to understand, I see myself now. Yeah. You know, I think if I self-attack enough, God's going to take pity on me, because that's what, you know.
My mum and dad did. Yeah, entitlement. Like, as long as I had a feeling that I deserve it, then I should get it.
And there's no gratitude with that.
There's none.
And this is something you'll come to learn. You can't receive God's love at all until you feel emotionally that it's a gift, that it would be a gift, you know. And yeah, that's powerful to come to recognize. All those other times I was praying, it was like I felt like I should get it, or it was a demand, or it was an antidote from my bad feelings. You know,
I want to be rescued.
When you realize, my job is feel my feelings. That's up to me, nobody else, not Jesus, not Margaret, not Emma, not God. No, it's all my job, that bit. Then you feel like, wow, and then if someone loves me, what a gift. Because I'm not seeking that to avoid anything inside of myself.
But it's not God's job to feel your feelings for you, nor is it God's job to expose them for you either. It's not God's job for you to discover what your sins are. They're all your jobs. They're what you need to do. Sin is your creation, not God's. And so God's not going to take any responsibility for it whatsoever. So if you feel bad from your sin, well, too bad. You're going to feel bad from your sin because you sinned.
Well, that's what you said earlier. There's going to be a lot of painful, uncomfortable feelings in this process.
And this is where we see a lot of times in our childhood, when we started to feel bad, mum and dad came to our rescue. Oh, my child's feeling bad. Oh, poor child, you know. We'll help. Like, so something happens at school which is a result of the child's own behaviour, but you're going, oh, it's too bad. I'll help you out with that. You know, our child wants to go to football. I'll help you out with that. A child wants to go to, what do you have here? Baseball. I'll help you out with that, right? Not, I'm going to help the child work out how it's going to do that for itself. We have the feeling from childhood that our parents will help us out with everything. Will help us out because basically, fundamentally, they should live for us and not for themselves, right? And so we have these developing beliefs as a result of this, that spiritual beliefs inside of ourselves relating to God, which are fundamentally saying, God should act like my nice mum and daddy acted, right, towards me. And when God doesn't, you go, what's wrong with God? Like, you know, I'm asking, I'm sincere, what's he doing? Like, he doesn't care for me, or, you know, this is where all these sort of feelings that he doesn't care. But actually what he does is he cares that there are certain things that are your responsibility. He made you the pinnacle of his creation. There are certain things that are your responsibility, and there are certain things that are his. His responsibility is create the laws. His responsibility is to develop a system, be responsible for the fact that he had a lot of children, and put a set of guidelines in place, which he's done in the universe, that they all have to live by. That's his responsibility. His responsibility is not to give you love. That's a gift, right? Not a responsibility. But see, many of us as children have come to believe that it's our parents' responsibility to love us. But it's not. It's our parents' responsibility to parent us, to educate us.
To create laws that help
Now-
us to understand ourselves and our free will.
Now, of course, if they wanted to educate us, they'd probably be driven by love to do it, right? But God doesn't demand of every parent on earth that they must love their children, right? In the sense of must give the child a whole heap of things which God would not give them, right? So God expects the parent to love the way He loves his children, which is all about helping the child develop self-responsibility, understand their own power, understand their own personality, understand their own nature, and come to enjoy that. You know, that's what God does with you, right? So that's what He would like, as parents, us to do for our children. But the problem is most parents don't do that. And instead what they do is they start rescuing the child from its own bad behavior. And then, of course, when we start praying to God, we think that God, being the nice daddy that He should be, will rescue us from our own bad behavior. And He won't. And so then what happens is we start going, oh, it's like, do I want a relationship with God if I am going to have to be responsible for my own bad behavior? Like, I want a relationship with God where He fixes my bad behavior results. You know, the results of my bad behavior. And you know, this is a fundamental flaw, of course. And this is also a fundamental flaw that drives a lot of people's prayer, so-called prayer. But it's not sincere. Sincere prayer is, I created my sins. I am going to have to identify them, work through them, fix them. Now, God's only going to help if I am repentant for them. He's only going to help them.
Thank you. What if we go through the sin and all the actions or reactions as a result of what we did? How do we know if God has forgiven us for that sin? So we repented and we felt and we cried and we did all that. How do we know that that egg mark on our soul has now disappeared?
You'll feel it instantly. It's like you'll get to the stage where there is no longer any pain that you feel when you think about the event. There's no longer any feeling inside of you that causes you to feel that the same behaviour would be acceptable. And it's now easy for you to live without that behaviour. So instead of struggling against your addictions, you will actually find it easy to give it up. Do you understand? Because the reason why it's there is no longer there. So naturally you're going to give up easily. So all this struggle that people do and all this keeping on trying and all this stuff is all proof that none of that's happened. So it's very easy to measure when God's actually forgiven. Because when God's forgiven, you will feel differently, completely differently. You will not ever be attracted to that sin again. You will never do it again.
And not as a result of detunement.
No.
You'll feel more connected to yourself.
Yep.
But you won't feel drawn towards the same action.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
You will know when God's forgiven you. Yeah. And when I say you will know, you will feel it, and your actions will display it easily. It won't be a trial. It won't be hard for you to do the loving thing anymore on those issues. It'll be easy. It'll be automatic. And you'll notice it in yourself that it is. You'll even notice it. You'll see, it's such a breeze now to act in a more loving way in this situation. So let's say this particular issue of having an affair, let's say the whole sin was dealt with. There will never be another time where you'll feel sexually attracted to a man who's not your soulmate. Right? There would never be a time where you felt that it was good for anybody, even your friends, family, parents, children, anybody to have an affair with somebody. When I say have an affair, what I mean is have an affair that begins without knowledge of all parties involved. You understand? You would have to, if you're going to develop a relationship with somebody, I'd have to, if I want to develop a relationship with Mary, I'm going to have to let everybody in Mary's life know that that's what I want. Right? And I would do that automatically because I know that it's the right thing to do and I feel that it's the right thing to do. I would, like if Mary's still living at home with her parents, I'd let them know. If Mary had a family around, I'd let every one of them know. You know what I mean? Let them all know.
And it wouldn't be like, oh, I've got to do that.
It'd be, I want to.
Oh, I feel happy.
Yeah. I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah. It's a pleasure. I want to. I'm excited to. I don't feel restricted. I feel expansive.
I'd be prepared for Mary's rejection as well. And I'd be okay with that. Like if she said, no, she doesn't want that on those terms, she wants it secret. And I'm going, I can't have it secret. I can't even have a relationship with you secret. It has to be open out there. Right? So there would also be a feeling that whenever I feel like I'm like the sexual interest that I feel in others would be just for her. Right? Because I've dealt with some of my motivations that pleasure at any price is okay. And I've dealt with all that, right? I've worked through the fact that I can only really be happy when other people are also happy. And I can't sacrifice other people's happiness for my own happiness, right? In the sense of I can't cause unhappiness for others, in the sense that God's definition of unhappiness for others, not their definition, but I can't cause it. In other words, I can speak openly with Mary and the family and everything about wanting to have a relationship with her. That's not me causing their unhappiness. What would be causing my unhappiness is trying to have a relationship with her in secret. That's going to be causing their unhappiness because I'm lying, right? And I couldn't do that, right? But I'm perfectly okay saying, Mary's the girl I want. Even if Mary herself doesn't want to hear it, right? And if I felt from Mary she didn't want to hear it, I wouldn't even tell her. But if I felt she wanted to hear it, then I would tell her. Right? But then I wouldn't expect her to have a relationship with me, even though I've told her. Right? I would let her make her own decisions and her own choices and respect her free will, respect the free will of the people involved as well. Yeah. But I also wouldn't put up the rage and anger of people condemning me for my action. If my actions are taken in harmony with love, then there's no need for me to feel guilty about my actions.
So it wouldn't be outside of God's laws for, in that scenario, for Mary, who's in this hypothetical family, to have feelings for another man like yourself.
Look, in the state where humans are in, most of humans are completely confused about their own feelings. Isn't that true? Like one moment they feel like they're in love, the next moment they don't feel like they're in love. There's all sorts of, there's a lot of confusion, and that's based upon the fact that most of us don't know ourselves very well at all. Right? It does require me, if I'm going to act in a loving way, to come to know myself and know what God's laws are on certain issues. It does require me to do that. So before I go willy-nilly trying to create relationships because I'm lonely, I would have to deal with my loneliness. I have to deal with, so I might need 4 or 5 years celibate at least to start dealing with a lot of those issues, right? Before I even contemplated having a relationship with somebody. You follow? But once I've done a lot of that work, and now I feel like I'm ready to attract my soulmate into my life, well, it could be that my soulmate is married. And it could be that my soulmate has children. And it could be that she's in jail. It could be that, I don't know where she is, right? She could be anywhere. Of course, as I've mentioned before, the two soul halves are attracted to each other even at birth, so naturally it's pretty common that they're in the same country as you, and really common that they're quite nearby, like within a few hundred, within 50 or 60 miles of you, oftentimes. We just haven't met them yet. We haven't drawn them into our life yet. Now, under those circumstances, if I'm growing and changing, the only person I'm going to want to have a relationship with is my soulmate. Because to have any other relationship would be against the design of my soul, therefore a sin. Right? So this is something that we were asked in Canada, I think, wasn't it?
We asked about this.
Everywhere. Yeah. Is it a sin to have a relationship with anyone other than your soulmate?
Yeah, Canada, yes.
Fundamentally, the answer to that question is yes. Right? Because it's against the design of your own soul to have a relationship with anyone other than your soulmate. However, most of you don't know who your soulmate is, and many of you are in a relationship and you don't know who that is, who the other half is. Under those circumstances, well, you have to do some sincere work to work it out.
Well, you have to work out who you are. Everyone on earth doesn't even know who they are.
Yeah.
So you can't really discern who your soulmate is until you've done that work.
Yeah. So we would recommend first that you do the work of finding out who you are. And that requires getting rid of a lot of your sins, so you get rid of all your addictions, so that you end up knowing who you are and what your personality is. And then in that process, you will find certain people attracted to you and other ones repulsed by you. Right? And certain things will happen as a result, including things like breakups and marriage breakups, and all sorts of things might happen as a result of that growth. And then you'll be generally left free to find out who your soulmate is. But you're not going to have the attitude of, I like the look of her, or I like the look of him, so he's my soulmate. It's not going to be like that, right? You're going to have to deal with every one of your attractions, actually, because most of them are sins. Most of them are actually related to childhood injuries. Many of you have grown up with a father or a mother. If you're an opposite gender child to the person you've been looking at as your ideal, oftentimes if your father was a nice man, you'll think he was the kind of ideal. And you're going to start to expect that your soulmate is the same as him. He's not the same as him. Your soulmate is the same as you. not the same as him. His own soulmate is the same as him. Not your soulmate. Your soulmate is the same as you. Unless you understand who you are, how are you going to find the other half of you? You're not going to find the other half.
Or could it be the opposite? Like, everything my dad, because...
No. It's not going to be any predictable mathematical thing as the opposite of my dad or the same as my dad.
But you could be attracted to the opposite of your
That's
dad,
what I
for
mean.
sure.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that that's your soulmate either. That just means you're reacting.
Yeah.
That is just your reaction to your dad. You didn't like him, and so you want someone opposite to him. But what if your soulmate happens to be very similar to him? Then you're going to be rejecting him as well, right? So the key is to find out who you are first. And then once you know who you are, then you can start working out who the other half of you might be, right? And when I say working out, it's easier just to be you and attract them. So they recognize you and you recognize them when you meet. That's easier. God designed it that way so that you'd meet when you're 10 or something, or at puberty or shortly after. That's how God designed everything to work. But we've got so many addictions that many people never meet their soulmate on earth, and for hundreds of years after, in the spirit world.
How many married, I know like in the pageant messages, they were married, Helen and James, and they are soulmates.
Yeah.
How often, maybe this is a silly question, maybe it doesn't even...
Pretty often.
Pretty often you are married to you can be married.
Yeah, pretty often people are married to
their
their soulmates, yeah. Pretty
Really?
often. It's not,
Obviously it's not 100%.
When I say pretty often, it's not like 50% or 20%.
Oh,
It's
okay.
more like 5%, maybe
Oh,
less. But it's pretty often.
think
when
of that as
about it.
Given how detached everyone is from their true selves, that's a
Pretty amazing.
amazing. Yeah. From our perspective, that's like a lot.
It's not like a large percentage. You can see why, because every family of origin has its own sins, and then you create your own sins as well, and then you have your own addictions based on your own sins, and your own attractions based on those sins, and you can see that unless you unravel it, it's pretty hard to recognise the other half of yourself. Yeah. What's the time?
It's 4:10.
Yeah.
I think rather than talk more about soulmates, is there any final questions about this topic, about the sin principles and stuff? Yes.
So underlying a lot of this, would it be that I don't truly want to know myself, and therefore I don't want to know about others, and therefore I don't want to know God?
I don't think you can generalise it that much. It's sort of like everyone's life is a unique life. You have a unique personality, a unique nature, and you've also had a unique upbringing. Even in the same family, you've had a different upbringing to say, if you have brothers and sisters, to them. And also your upbringing is largely determined by how your parents felt at the time, and how your extended family felt at the time of your childhood as well. And that's often a changing proposition. So everybody has very, very different life. And this is why we should also not compare ourselves and our own progress with other people, because what you may have to deal with might be a lot more severe or less severe than what other people have to deal with, given their life. The key thing to do is to work through discovering yourself. That is true, but to discover yourself, there's two things you're going to have to do. One is you're going to have to get rid of your addictions, because you think your addictions are you at the moment. Mm-hmm. So you've got to get rid of your addictions, and then you've got to be open to discovering your true desires based on your personality and nature, and choosing bravely to be that person, right? And if you're prepared to do both things, you will find out where your soulmate is, who he is, probably who she is, and you'll be able to work through all those issues quite easily, right? But you need to do the sort of foundational work, which is all about your sin and who you are, and discovering who that is and being who that is.
But all of your sin doesn't come. I think your question was like, is all my sin really coming from the fact that I don't want to know myself? That's not, no. It's too simplistic.
It's true that a lot of your sin comes from not wanting to feel yourself, right? To feel the emotions that are within you. A lot of sin does come from that. But that's not, as you've seen, the only sin we have. A lot of the sin we have, we're creating because of the choices we're making, the decisions we're making, how we've used our will over the course of our lifetime, what we've chosen to do, the little tiny decisions we made that led us down a path that often was to our own disadvantage, but also to the disadvantage of others. These things all play a part, and this is why, unfortunately, sin is such like a labyrinth it's like a puzzle or a labyrinth, and God can help you, unpuzzle it all, or you could say join all the pieces of the puzzle together so that you understand the full picture. I quite often think of sin as like, you imagine like a 2,000 piece jigsaw puzzle sitting on the table, and it's all the same colour, or it's at the beginning it all looks like the same colour to you, wow. and it's sort of like, this is going to be a long-term proposition, and there needs to be some way, you can get some help, and God will give you some help in terms of understanding, this joins with that, and this joins with that, and this joins with that, but you're going to have to be pretty sincere about doing the puzzle. You're going to have to be pretty sincere about engaging the process of that puzzle. And in some ways, it's a measure of your sincerity as to whether you're willing to do it, isn't it? Can you see that? It's like, okay, if sin is the main cause of not only my pain and suffering, but also the pain and suffering of others, then surely if I was sincere, I would love to be able to unravel and build the picture, unravel the puzzle, build the picture, so that I understand what I've done, and so that I can correct what I've done. If that was a true desire on my part, I would want to do that, right? The difference between God's way and the human natural love way is that people generally on the natural love path don't want to do it. And so the law forces them to do it. The law of compensation, the law of reparation forces you to do it. The people on God's path get to the point where they want to do it. And that where they want to repent because they know that it's going to lead to happiness, not just for them, but for everybody around them, the people they interact with. It's going to lead to further happiness. So the main difference between the two paths is whether you're sincere about wanting to do it, wanting to address your sin. Make sense? And if that sincerity exists, you will desire to unravel the puzzle. You would desire to build the picture of what's gone on in your life. And in the process of building that picture, you will come to see the final picture. Right? You will come to see, instead of seeing your life as a whole heap of disjointed and unconnected events, you'll start to see, this led to that, and this led to that, and this is why I did that, and this led to that, and this led to that. And you also start understanding in the process your personality and nature, because you go, that piece of the puzzle there, that piece of the puzzle wasn't a sin. That was a bit of what I was really like there, you know? And you start to discover all the pieces where what you really like as well. And so what you do is you end up in this place emotionally where now you understand all of your career, right? Whatever, how long that was. But also you understand your personality and your nature. And you also start to understand how you can be more of that and how good that is. That you've got a unique personality and nature and you can be more of it, right? And you start to understand how everything fits together. You become not just aware, but you become so awake that you see everything clearly of what's gone on in your life and why it went on and why there were certain people involved in your life and why that happened and what they were there for, how you attracted them and how you either harmed them or helped them, or how they either harmed you or helped you. You'll see everything about it, and it's very enlightening. It's a process of you start the process and it's like you're completely stupid. You know what I mean? And that's how when you look back on it, and when I look back at myself now, back on when I was say 30 in this life, I was absolutely stupid in comparison to what I am now. And when I say stupid, what I mean is I had no idea what in the hell was going on. I had no idea why. I had no idea why certain people were involved in my life. I had no idea why I chose the things I chose. I had no idea about the sad events or the hard events or anything, why they came about in my life. I didn't understand absolutely any of it, right? And when I look back at it now, so it's 28 years later, so I'm now 61, and when I started the process I was 33 and I'm now 61. And I look back at 28 years and I go, I'm like a totally different person now. Totally different. I understand so much more about my life. And I even not only understand my own life, I often understand all of your lives too now, which I couldn't do before. I couldn't, people used to come, I was a minister, and people used to come for help. And a lot of times I'm going, how the hell did I help them? I've got no idea how to help them. I've got no idea what their problem is even. How can I help them? I don't, pray more, whatever. I got no idea what to do, how to help the person. Now, because of having dealt with all of these things, I do know how. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So you get this level of information and understanding that's way beyond what you think is even possible, but only if you do the work. Right? So there's huge advantages in doing the work.
And
maybe we should believe.
Yes, just final note,
Yeah.
putting that puzzle pieces together, that's all emotional.
Yeah.
Your brain does not have the capacity. It's too complex a puzzle. You know, your brain will try to keep up and try, but really you won't see all that interconnectedness with your intellect until you are in that process emotionally.
Yeah. Even people in the sixth sphere don't see it. Even who've had thousands of years experience of life don't see it. There's many times when I've met a sixth sphere spirit, we start talking and within a short period of time it becomes plain. He doesn't understand what happened in his childhood, he doesn't understand why. Just becomes very plain. And it's because when you start connecting to God, you're getting God's assistance to help you see everything. It's just wonderful. Yeah. But we need to probably finish today there, huh?
Thank you.